So there I was, standing in front of the most prestigious combat academy in the known galaxy, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. The Galactic Combat Institute on Valorix Prime. 10,000 combat protocols, 847 alien species, represented a 99.2% failure rate. And somehow, they'd accepted Jake Martinez, the first human ever to apply. The admissions letter had been pretty clear about their feelings. Quote, "Your entrance exam results are statistically impossible to be this average. We are accepting you purely out of scientific curiosity." End quote. Nothing says welcome like being someone's science experiment. Dean Crafter met me at the entrance, all four of his scaly arms crossed in what I'd come to recognize as the universal body language for disappointment. He was a Craxion. Looked like someone had taken a crocodile, gave it better posture, and taught it to sneer professionally. "Human," he said, managing to make my species sound like a diagnosis. "I have overseen this institution for 43 cycles. In that time, I have seen species with reflexes that break the sound barrier fail out in their first semester. I have watched beings who could calculate probability matrices in their sleep wash out before mid. You have 6 months to master protocols that take most species decades to learn. I expect you will provide us with valuable data on human limitations before your inevitable expulsion." "Nice to meet you too," I said. "Is there like a welcome packet or something?" He handed me a data tablet that was roughly the size of a dictionary and twice as heavy. "This contains the first 100 protocols you must memorize by next week. Try not to damage yourself before we can gather sufficient research data." My dormitory was about what you'd expect from a place that thought humans were a joke. Small, gray, and shared with a roommate who looked like someone had melted a beach ball and given it anxiety. This was Blipner, a gelatoid who'd failed the academy 3 times already. "Oh, great," Blipner burbled when I walked in, his gelatinous form quivering with what I assumed was distress. "They gave me the human. Do you know what the other students are saying? They re-saying, you're going to get us both expelled when you fail spectacularly during the first combat simulation. No offense. None taken. Why are you still here if you failed 3 times? Because my family has attended this academy for 12 generations, and I refuse to be the one who breaks tradition by giving up. I will fail with dignity until I succeed." I looked at the little blob creature, trembling in his corner of the room, and realized we had something in common. We are both expected to fail. The difference was, I'd never been great at meeting expectations. "Tell you what, Blipner, let's make a deal. I won't get us expelled spectacularly, and you stop assuming we're both doomed." "Sound good?" He jiggled, which I learned meant he was thinking. "Your confidence is either inspiring or a symptom of not understanding the gravity of your situation." "Probably both," I admitted, dropping my bag on the floor. "So what's the first protocol I need to learn?" Blipner projected a hologram from a device in his room. An alien warrior appeared, demonstrating a series of movements so complicated it looked like they were having a seizure in 5 different directions at once. Protocol 1. The foundational stance of universal combat readiness. You must hold this position while maintaining awareness of 7 simultaneous threat vectors and preparing your body to transition into any of the other 9,999 protocols. I watched the hologram for about 10 seconds. "Yeah, that looks uncomfortable and complicated." "Good, Italiano. You need to practice for at least 6 hours daily for the next month to even begin to approximate the proper form." "Or," I said, "I could just stand in a way that lets me move fast when I need to." "That seems more practical." Blipner made a sound like a sigh, mixed with a gurgle. "You are definitely going to get us expelled." Master Vexter was a legend. 17 battlefield commendations, veteran of 6 galactic conflicts, and the kind of warrior who could kill you with a single glance, assuming that glance was accompanied by one of his many weapons. He looked like an octopus had merged with a tiger and decided to get really into fitness. Muscular tentacles, striped fur, and an expression that suggested he had absolutely no patience for nonsense. Our first class had about 30 students, representing species from across the galaxy. There was Zira, a Crystallax, with 4 eyes and crystalline armor plating, who'd already mastered 3,000 protocols before even arriving. There was a floating gas cloud named Huhush, which was apparently how you spelled the sound of wind, who could phase through matter. And there was a rock creature named Granite, because apparently some species just leaned into the obvious. "Today," Vexter announced, his voice like gravel in a blender, "we begin with Protocol 4387, the 17-step spiral strike. This technique has been perfected over millennia and represents the pinnacle of offensive combat efficiency. Watch carefully." He moved, and honestly, it was impressive. 17 distinct movements, each flowing into the next, creating a spiraling attack pattern that hit the training dummy from multiple angles simultaneously. The dummy, which was made of some kind of alien super material, cracked down the middle. "Now, you will each demonstrate," Vexter said. One by one, the students stepped up. Zira executed it perfectly, her crystalline arms moving in precise geometric patterns. Her whoosh sort of condensed and whooshed around in a spiral, which apparently counted. Even Blipner managed a wobbly approximation that made Vexter nod with mild approval. Then it was my turn. I looked at the training dummy. I looked back at the dummy. Then I walked up and punched it as hard as I could. The dummy didn't just crack. It shattered. Pieces of alien supermaterial scattered across the training floor like expensive confetti. The entire class went silent. Vexter's tentacles stopped moving, which I'd learned meant he was either very impressed or about to murder someone. Based on his expression, it was definitely the second one. "Human Martinez," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. "Would you care to explain what you just did?" "I hit it," I said, shaking out my hand because that had actually hurt quite a bit. "It broke. Objective achieved." The objective was to demonstrate Protocol 4387. The objective was to break the dummy. At least that's what happened when everyone else did the spinny thing. I just skipped to the breaking part. A vein, or whatever the tentacle tiger equivalent was, started throbbing on Vexter's forehead. "You will report to remedial protocol memorization immediately after this class. You will study Protocol 4387 until you can execute it properly, even if it takes you the entire semester. Can I just punch things instead? Seems more efficient." Remedial memorization. Dismissed. The cafeteria was an experience. Imagine a food court designed by someone who'd never seen food, filled with creatures who ate things ranging from liquid hydrogen to crystallized thoughts. I grabbed what looked like it might be edible for a human and sat down. Zirat appeared across from me, her 4 eyes all focusing on me with what I was pretty sure was contempt. "You are either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant, human. Protocol 4387 has been refined over 6,000 years by the greatest warriors in the galaxy. You punched a dummy and think you're clever. I don't think I'm clever," I said around a mouthful of something that tasted like chicken but was definitely not chicken. "I think I'm practical. The dummy is just as broken as when you did the fancy spin move. Maybe more broken, actually. Combat is not about destruction. It is about precision, technique, and honoring the traditions of those who came before us. Every protocol exists for a reason, sure, but do they exist because they're the best way to do something? Or because someone a long time ago decided that that's how things should be done, and everyone just kept doing it?" Her crystalline structure actually shimmered with what might have been anger. "You have been here one day, and you presume to question millennia of accumulated wisdom. I presume to question if maybe, just maybe. Sometimes the old way isn't always the best way. Call me crazy. I do not need to call you crazy. Your actions speak for themselves. I look forward to watching you fail, human. It'll be educational." She left in a huff, her crystalline feet clicking against the floor with indignant precision. Blipner oozed into her vacated seat. "You are making enemies very quickly," he observed. "Story of my life," I said. "Hey, you want to know a secret? I don't think these protocols are actually designed to teach combat. I think they're designed to make combat look impressive." "That is heresy." "Probably. Want to help me commit some more heresy tomorrow?" Blipner jiggled thoughtfully. "My family would disown me." "Is that a yes?" "Obviously." The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in creative failure. Every protocol test I took, I failed spectacularly on technique while somehow achieving the objective faster than anyone else in the class. Protocol 2156, gravitational momentum redistribution, was supposed to involve a complex series of weight transfers that allowed you to throw an opponent using their own mass against them. Took most species about 6 months to master. I just grabbed my sparring partner, a lizard guy named Scarth, and tackled him. He went down. Test objective complete. Protocol execution score, 8%. Protocol 8942. Molecular deflection defense. Required you to vibrate your molecular structure at precise frequencies to deflect incoming projectiles. I just watched where the training drones were aiming and moved before they fired. Dodging, revolutionary concept. Protocol execution score, 3%. Survival rate, 100%. Vexter was developing a twitch in one of his tentacles. I was developing a reputation as either an idiot savant or just an idiot, depending on who you asked. The interesting thing was, Blipner started watching what I did. Really watching. And then he started trying it himself. Turned out, when you stopped worrying about executing Protocol 6793 perfectly and just focused on not getting hit, you stopped getting hit as much. Revolutionary. I achieved a 73% defense rating today, Lipner said one evening. Jiggling with what I'd learned was excitement. My previous best was 41%. The instructor asked if I had been studying under a different master. What did you tell him? I told him I'd been studying the ancient human art of paying attention to where the attacks are coming from. That's not really an ancient art. That's just common sense. Common sense is surprisingly uncommon at this academy. Zira, meanwhile, was getting increasingly frustrated. She'd approach me in the training halls, her 4 eyes narrowed in concentration. I have been analyzing your techniques, she said one day after class. You should not be succeeding. You violate every principle of proper combat form. Your stance is amateurish. Your movements are inelegant. And you have the tactical sophistication of a rock. Hey, Granite is pretty sophisticated, I said, nodding at the rock creature doing meditation in the corner. Do not deflect with humor. I am trying to understand how your stupidity keeps working. Maybe it's not stupidity. Maybe I'm just not overthinking it. Combat requires thinking, strategy, anticipation, execution. I do all those things. I just don't do them while worrying about whether my left tentacle, which I don't have, is at the correct 47-degree angle, prescribed by protocol whatever. She made a sound like glass chimes in a windstorm, which I'd learned meant she was frustrated. You are impossible. I prefer persistent. Dean Crabther called me to his office 3 weeks before mid. His office was decorated with weapons from 100 worlds and looked like a museum dedicated to things that could kill you creatively. Martinez, he said. All 4 arms folded in a way that suggested he'd been practicing this conversation. Your instructors informed me that you have the worst protocol execution scores in Academy history. You also have the highest objective completion rate of any first semester student in the past decade. This is creating a philosophical problem. Sorry. The Academy exists to preserve and pass on the martial traditions of the galaxy. You are disrespecting those traditions with your crude, simplistic approach. However, you are also succeeding at the fundamental purpose of combat training, which is to prevail against opponents. This makes you either a problem or a paradigm shift, and I have not yet determined which. Can I be both? You are not helping your case. I am informing you that at the end of this semester, you will face the gauntlet. It is our ultimate test. A combat simulation where students face 100 holographic opponents using every protocol in our database. Most students attempt it in their final year. After mastering at least 5,000 protocols, you will attempt it in 6 months. It seems unfair. Life is unfair. Combat is unfair. You wish to graduate from this academy, prove that your brutish human methods are not simply luck. Survive the gauntlet. Dismissed. I walked out of his office and found Blipner waiting in the hall. I heard everything through the door. He said, Your species has excellent sound dampening, but my species can sense vibrations through solid matter. You are being set up to fail. Probably, I agreed. Want to help me not fail? Obviously. What is your plan? Same plan as always. Hit things until they stop being a problem. That is a terrible plan. It's worked so far. Your confidence is either going to be legendary or a cautionary tale. I cannot determine which. Let's aim for both. Midterm evaluations came with all the stress you'd expect from an institution that treated combat like a religious experience. We gathered in the main arena, hundreds of students from dozens of species, all waiting to see their scores projected for everyone to judge. 0 went first among our class, 97% on protocol accuracy, 94% on objective completion. The crowd did that thing where they made appreciative noises in 17 different alien languages. She prinned, her crystalline structure catching the light in a way that was definitely intentional. Then came my scores, 34% on protocol accuracy, 100% on objective completion. Time to completion, 40% faster than class average. The arena went quiet. You could have heard a pin drop, assuming pins made sound in whatever atmospheric composition they were using that day. This is impossible. Someone whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. The human is cheating, somehow, another voice added. Vexter stood up from the instructor's panel, his tentacles moving in agitation. Cadet Martinez's scores are legitimate. I have personally overseen every one of his evaluations. He completes objectives through what I can only describe as aggressive intuition and a complete disregard for proper form. That is not how combat works. One of the other instructors protested. And yet, Vexter said, sounding tired, it works for him. What happened next was unexpected. Students started approaching me. Quietly at first, then in increasing numbers. They'd find me in the training halls or the library, and they'd ask questions. How did I defend against Protocol 3000 and whatever? I dodged. But how did I know where to dodge? I watched where the attack was going. But what about the faint matrices? I ignored them and watched the attacker's center of mass because that's what actually moves. It was all painfully obvious stuff to me. But apparently, when you spent years memorizing protocols, you forgot to watch what your opponent was actually doing. Blipner was my first convert, but he wasn't the last. A four-armed warrior named Krixta started simplifying her movements. Whoosh stopped trying to phase through attacks in the prescribed manner and just phased where the attacks were unique. Even Granit, the rock creature, started asking questions about human combat philosophy. We do not have a combat philosophy, I told him one day. We have a survival instinct and a tendency to get creative when people try to kill us. That is a philosophy, Granite rumbled, his voice like an avalanche in slow motion. You simply have not formalized it. Vexter discovered what was happening during a routine training session. He watched Blipner successfully defend against a complex attack pattern by just moving away from where the attacks were landing instead of executing the 17-step defensive protocol. Blipner, Vexter said, his voice dangerously calm. What are you doing? Defending myself, Master Vexter. Using what protocol? Blipner jiggled nervously, using the human technique of not being where the attacks are. Every tentacle on Vexter's body went rigid. Martinez, my office. Now. We stood in his office, surrounded by weapons and trophies and the accumulated respect of a lifetime of warrior tradition. Vexter looked at me with all 8 of his eyes, and I could see he was genuinely trying to understand. Explain to me, A sighed slowly, why you think you can discard 10,000 protocols that have been developed, refined, and proven over millions of years of galactic combat. I'm not discarding them, I said. I'm just asking if maybe we need all 10,000 of them. Look, I get it. Protocols are important. They teach discipline. They pass on knowledge. They give structure to chaos. But somewhere along the way, it feels like the Academy started teaching protocols for their own sake, not for what they're supposed to accomplish. And what are they supposed to accomplish? Winning, surviving, completing the objective. Combat isn't about looking pretty or honoring tradition. It's about making sure you're the one who walks away. You reduce millennia of wisdom to base survival instinct. I elevate survival instinct to an art form. There's a difference. Vexter was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something I didn't expect. You remind me of someone, a young warrior I trained many years ago, from a species called the Vrex. He questioned everything, simplified everything, and died in his first real battle because he did not respect the complexity of combat. I'm sorry. Do not be sorry. Be cautious. The gauntlet is not a training exercise. It is a simulation of real combat against every fighting style in the known galaxy. Your simplicity may be your strength in controlled environments, but it may also be your fatal weakness when facing true complexity. Then I guess I'll find out, I said, but I'm not going to change my approach because I'm scared of complexity. I'm going to trust that sometimes simple is better. Or sometimes, Vexter said quietly, simple is just simple, and you die. That conversation might have been the end of it, except Zira decided she'd had enough of watching the human idiot succeed. She challenged me to a sanctioned match in front of the entire academy. Full combat rules, no lethal force. Fight until submission or knockout. The arena was packed. Everyone wanted to see if the human-s luck would finally run out against someone who'd actually mastered the protocols. We stood across from each other on the arena floor. Zira in perfect combat stance, her crystalline structure gleaming with confidence, me standing like I was waiting for a bus, hands loose at my sides. I will show you, Zira announced to the crowd, why the protocols exist, why tradition and technique matter, why the human approach is nothing more than primitive luck. The match began. Zira executed Protocol 6634. The phantom limb deception, perfectly. It was beautiful, honestly. A series of feints and movement patterns designed to make opponents think your limbs were attacking from directions they were creating openings in their defense. 4,000 years of refinement went into that protocol. Masters studied it for decades. I ignored all of it, watched her center of mass, and when she committed to a real attack, I swept her legs and pinned her to the ground in about 4 seconds. The arena was silent. Zira lay there, staring up at me with all 4 eyes wide with shock. How? She whispered. You moved your whole body to attack, I said, offering her a hand up. All the fancy arm movements were impressive, but your body had to commit to make the real strike. I just waited for that and took out your foundation. But that is not how you defend against Protocol 6634. No, but it's how you defend against someone trying to hit you. She took my hand, and I pulled her up. Her crystalline structure was actually flickering, which I'd never seen before. I have spent 12 years mastering protocols. 12 years, and you have invalidated all of that in 4 seconds. I didn't invalidate anything. You're an amazing fighter, but maybe you're so focused on executing the protocol that you forgot combat is a conversation, not a monologue. Your opponent gets a vote. Dean Crafter stood up in the observation box, all 4 of his arms raised for attention. In light of Cadet Martinez's performance, and against my better judgment, I am officially authorizing him to attempt the gauntlet as his final examination. 1 month from today, all students are invited to witness what will either be the greatest upset in Academy history or the most spectacular failure we have ever recorded. Thanks for the vote of confidence, I muttered. Blipner oozed over to me as the crowd dispersed. I have been calculating the odds of your survival. They are not favorable. What are they? Approximately 7%, assuming you do not improve your technique. So you're saying there's a chance. I am saying you should probably write farewell messages to your family. That's the spirit. Buddy. The day of the gauntlet arrived with all the ceremony and spectacle of a major sporting event. The entire academy gathered in the main arena, which had been reconfigured into an elaborate combat simulation chamber. Holographic projectors lined the walls, ready to generate 100 opponents using every combat style in the galactic database. The betting pools were extensive and creative. Most students bet on how quickly I'd fail. Blipner, bless his gelatinous heart, bet his entire savings on me not just surviving but winning. When I asked him why, he just giggled and said, "Because you have taught me that confidence is sometimes more important than calculation." That's either really inspiring or really stupid. Why not both? The rules were simple. 100 holographic opponents would attack using randomized protocols from the Academy's database. I had to survive all 100. No time limit, no breaks, no duel. Most students who attempted the gauntlet did so after years of preparation and mastering thousands of protocols. I'd been here for 6 months and could barely execute one protocol correctly. Dean Crafter stood at the arena center, his forearms spread wide. Cadet Martinez, you stand before us as an anomaly, a student who rejects our teachings while somehow embodying their purpose. Today, you will face the ultimate test of your approach. The gauntlet has a 63% failure rate among our most prepared students. You have a 100% probability of failure based on your protocol mastery. Do you wish to proceed? Do I get partial credit for trying? No. Then I guess I better not fail. Let's do this. The holographic projectors hum to life, and the first opponent materialize, a Vorthian Blade Master. 8 arms holding 8 different weapons, all of them pointed at me. The attack came fast. Protocol 942, the Octopole strike sequence. 8 weapons attacking from 8 angles simultaneously, a technique that took decades to counter properly. I threw a training dummy at him. While he was cutting through it, I closed the distance and swept his legs. Opponent 1 disappeared in a shimmer of blue light. The crowd made confused noises. This was not how the gauntlet typically went. Opponents 2 through 10 came at once. Multiple species, multiple styles, coordinated attack patterns that required knowing at least 15 different defensive protocols to counter properly. I grabbed the nearest bench and used it as a shield, then as a battering ram, then as a projectile. When you're not worried about proper form, furniture becomes very useful. Aliens in the audience were providing commentary, and I could hear them getting increasingly confused. He's using environmental weapons. That is not proper combat technique. He just threw a chair at a hologram trained in Protocol 3018. The chair was effective. I am disturbed by how effective the chair was. Opponents 11 through 30 introduced more complexity. Energy weapons, psionic attacks, phase-shifting assassins. The Academy's AI was pulling out every trick in the book. I stayed mobile, never let them surround me, and hit whatever got close enough to hit. When the energy weapons started firing, I used other opponents as cover. When the psionic attacks came, I remembered that holograms couldn't actually get in your head and ignored them. When the assassin's phase shifted, I waited until they became solid to attack and hit them then. No. Vexter was leaning forward in his seat. His tentacles moving in patterns I'd learned meant he was analyzing something intently. Next to him, other instructors were furiously taking notes. He's not using any protocols, one of them said. No, Vexter replied slowly. He is using all of them. Watch his movement patterns. That dodge, that is the core principle behind Protocol 7012. Stripped of all the ceremonial execution. That strike. That is the fundamental concept of Protocol 2399. Without the traditional wind-up. He has not discarded the protocols. He has distilled them down to their essential purposes. That is impossible. No one can internalize 10,000 protocols in 6 months. He did not internalize the protocols. He internalized the purpose behind them and ignored everything else. Opponent 50 was a Craxian War Master, like Dean Crafter, but trained specifically for combat. It executed Protocol 4387, that same 17-step spiral strike that had started all this. Perfect form, devastating power, centuries of refinement in every movement. I ducked under the first strike, stepped inside the second, and punched him in what would be the solar plexus, if Craxions had solar plexuses. He disappeared. The arena was dead silent now. The betting pools had stopped taking bets. Everyone was just watching. Opponents 60 through 80 came in waves. The AI was clearly getting creative, throwing combinations that had never been tested before, mixing protocols from incompatible species, creating scenarios that were designed to be impossible. I got hit. A lot, actually. Took a plasma bolt to the shoulder that would have been really problematic if it was onto hologram. Got knocked down by a gravity manipulation attack that made my brain feel like it was being squeezed through a straw. A crystalline opponent managed to actually cut me with a hard light blade before I smashed its core, but I kept getting back up. Because that's what humans do. We're not the strongest species, not the fastest, not the smartest, but we are absolutely, stubbornly, irrationally persistent. Opponent 90X was a nightmare, a shifting mass of energy that could become any weapon, defend from any angle, and attack using all 10,000 protocols simultaneously. The Academy's final boss, created specifically to be unbeatable without perfect protocol knowledge. I stared at it for about 5 seconds while it cycled through forms, trying to intimidate me with its versatility. Then I realized something. It could do everything, which meant it couldn't specialize in anything. It was too busy being perfect to be effective. I rushed it, took hits from about 6 different weapon forms, and kept punching the core of its energy matrix until it exploded in a shower of holographic particles. 4 more opponents. A sniper, a berserker, a tactician, and a monk master. Each one representing a different philosophical approach to combat. The sniper I rushed before it could get distance. The berserker I tripped and let its own momentum take it down. The tactician I didn't give time to think. And the monk master, who was executing some beautiful meditation-based combat style. I just hit while it was meditating. Opponent 100 disappeared, and the arena fell completely silent. I stood in the center of the combat chamber, breathing hard, bleeding from a dozen minor cuts, and absolutely exhausted. The holographic projectors powered down. The simulation ended. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. The arena exploded with noise, cheering, shouting, arguing, and what sounded like several species having existential crises simultaneously. Dean Crafter stood, all 4 arms raised. It took a full minute for the crowd to quiet down. "Cadet Martinez," he said, his voice carrying across the arena with perfect diction and barely concealed disbelief. "You have completed the gauntlet in 18 minutes and 43 seconds. This is the fastest recorded completion time in the Academy's history. Your protocol execution score remains abysmal. Your objective completion score is perfect. The Academy Council will need to convene to discuss what this means for our curriculum. In the meantime, congratulations. Ju Pass." Blipner was jiggling so violently I thought he might actually bounce apart. "You did it. You actually did it. I am now moderately wealthy, due to your success. Glad I could help with your financial situation." Zira approached, her crystalline structure flickering in a way I'd learned meant she was processing complex emotions. "I do not understand what I just witnessed. You should not have succeeded. You violated every principle of proper combat. I violated every principle of proper protocol execution," I corrected. "But I follow the only principle that actually matters in combat. Stay alive, complete the objective, win the fight. Is that really all combat is to your species? Simple survival. Simple." I laughed. Survival is the least simple thing there is. Survival is creative, adaptive, and messy. It's not about knowing the right answer. It's about finding any answer that works. You want to know the human combat philosophy? It's this. When someone tries to kill you, you try harder not to die than they try to kill you. Everything else is just details. Vexter approached, his tentacles moving in a pattern I'd never seen before. Later, I'd learn it meant respect. "Martinez, I owe you an apology. I told you that your simplicity might be your fatal weakness. I was wrong. Your simplicity is your greatest strength, because it is not simple at all. It is clarity. You see through the complexity to the essential truth of combat, and you act on that truth without hesitation. That is not ignorance. That is mastery of a kind I have rarely witnessed. Does this mean I don't have to take remedial protocol memorization anymore? It means I will be recommending the Academy add your approach to our curriculum, though I suspect calling it a protocol would defeat the entire purpose." "Yeah, probably." Graduation day at the Galactic Combat Institute was traditionally a solemn ceremony. Centuries of tradition. Formal protocols for the protocols, speeches about honor and heritage, and the weight of responsibility. This year's graduation was all of that. plus a whole lot of confusion about what to do with the human who'd broken every rule and somehow proven them all right in the process. I finished first in practical combat scores and dead last in protocol theory. My final academic record looked like someone had taken 2 different students and mashed their transcripts together. Dean Crafter stood at the podium, preparing to give what was clearly going to be the most reluctant valedictorian introduction in Academy history. "It has been," he began, pausing to find the right words, "an unprecedented year. In my 43 cycles as dean of this institution, I have never encountered a student quite like Cadet Jake Martinez. He has challenged our assumptions, frustrated our instructors, and forced us to question whether we have been teaching combat or simply teaching the appearance of combat. His methods are crude, his technique is abysmal, and his complete disregard for proper protocol would be grounds for expulsion at any other time in this academy. History." He paused, all 4 of his eyes fixed on me. And yet, his results speak for themselves. He completed the gauntlet faster than any student in recorded history. He taught his fellow cadets to think critically about their training rather than simply accept it. And he reminded us all that the purpose of combat training is not to preserve tradition, but to prepare warriors for survival. It is my reluctant honor to introduce our valedictorian, Cadet Jack Martinez. The applause was mixed, but Blipner was jiggling enthusiastically enough for 10 people. I walked to the podium, looked out at hundreds of alien faces representing dozens of species, and realized I had absolutely not prepared a speech. So, I started. This is awkward. I didn't actually expect to graduate, let alone graduate first. But since I'm here, and you're all here, let me tell you what I learned at this academy. I didn't learn your 10,000 protocols. I learned like 12 of them, badly. And I'm pretty sure I'm still doing Protocol 17 wrong, even though it has just a basic stance. Some laughter from the audience. Good. They had a sense of humor. What I learned is that sometimes you just need to hit stuff until the problem goes away. And before you all start thinking I'm reducing combat to mindless violence, let me clarify. Hitting stuff until the problem goes away requires knowing what to hit, when to hit it, and how hard to hit it. That takes observation, decision-making, and commitment. That is combat. Everything else is just style points. I could see Vexter nodding slowly from his seat. Your protocols are amazing. They represent thousands of years of accumulated wisdom from hundreds of species. But somewhere along the way, I think the Academy forgot that protocols are tools, not goals. You were teaching students to execute Protocol 6000 whatever perfectly, but not teaching them to ask if Protocol 6000 whatever was the right choice for the situation. Zira's crystalline structure was flickering, but in a way that suggested she was thinking rather than angry. Progress. So here's my contribution to this Academy's legacy. I'm not going to teach you a new protocol. I'm going to teach you a new question. Before you execute any protocol, ask yourself, what am I actually trying to accomplish here? Because if you can answer that question clearly, you might find you don't need 17 steps to accomplish something that takes 3. That's now Protocol 10,001. Simplified combat efficiency, or as I like to call it, the Martinez method. Dean Kravther looked like he was having a stroke with all 4 arms. You cannot simply declare a new protocol. He just did. And according to the Academy Charter, which Blipner helped me look up, any graduating valedictorian can submit 1 combat technique for consideration. I'm submitting the question, what am I trying to accomplish? And what's the simplest way to do it? You can spend the next decade formalizing it if you want, but that's the core of it. I looked out at the graduating class, at the underclassmen watching from the upper seats, at the instructors who looked like they couldn't decide if I was a genius or an idiot. You're all better fighters than me. Faster, stronger, more skilled. But I graduated first because I never forgot that the point of a fight is to win it, not to look good losing it. Remember that, then you'll all be fine. Probably, statistically, some of you won't be fine. But that's not really my responsibility at this point. More laughter. I was on a roll. In conclusion, thank you for accepting the first human into this academy, even if it was just to see me fail spectacularly. Thank you to Master Vexter for not killing me, despite clearly wanting to, several times. Thank you to Blipner for being a great roommate and for making a lot of money betting on me. And thank you all for teaching me that sometimes the best way to honor tradition is to question whether it still makes sense. Hit hard, hit smart, and don't stop until the problem is solved. That's Protocol 10,001. You're welcome. I walked off the podium to applause. That was significantly more enthusiastic than when I'd walked up. Dean Crafter looked like he needed a vacation. Vexter looked contemplative. And Blipner was jiggling with what I was pretty sure was pride. The ceremony continued with more speeches, more tradition, more formal protocol. But the buzz in the audience was about the human who'd finished first by ignoring almost everything he'd even taught. After the ceremony, as graduates mingled with family and friends, a group of stern-looking aliens in military uniforms approached me. Their leader, a 6-armed insectoid with more medals than chest to put them on, extended one of his claws. Kavit Martinez, I am General Cathar of the Galactic Defense Forces. We have been monitoring your progress at the Academy with great interest. Your performance in the Gauntlet has been analyzed by our Tactical Division. We would like to offer you a position in our Special Operations Division. Special Operations, that sounds dangerous. It is extremely dangerous. It is also extremely necessary. We require operatives who can think creatively in combat situations, who do not rely solely on established protocols when facing unknown threats. Based on your academy record, you appear uniquely qualified. What would I be doing? Classified operations against hostile forces that do not follow conventional combat doctrine, pirates, insurgents, and other threats that do not behave according to established military protocols. You would need to adapt quickly, improvise solutions, and survive situations where traditional training might prove inadequate. So basically what I've been doing, but with actual danger instead of holograms. Precisely. Your compensation would be substantial, and you would be authorized to train other operatives in your methods. We are particularly interested in your Protocol 10,001. I looked at Blipner, who had oozed over to listen. What do you think? I think you are going to either become a legend or die spectacularly, and I would like to be present to document which occurs. Also, they are probably hiring support staff, and I have become accustomed to your chaos. Is that a yes? Obviously. I turned back to General Cathar. I have some conditions. First, Blipner comes with me. Second, I don't want to just train people in my method. I want to work with Master Vexter to develop a new combat curriculum that combines traditional protocols with adaptive thinking. And third, you have to promise that if I tell you something is a bad idea, you'll at least consider that I might be right. General Cathar's antennae twitched in what might have been amusement. The first 2 conditions are acceptable. The third condition is impossible to guarantee, but I will ensure your tactical assessments are given appropriate weight. Do we have an agreement? We have an agreement. When do I start? Immediately. There is a situation developing in the Outer Rim that requires someone with your particular skill set. A pirate fleet that has been evading our forces for 6 months. They do not fight according to any established doctrine. They improvise, adapt, and refuse to engage in conventional warfare. So they fight like I do. Essentially, yes, we believe you may be uniquely suited to anticipate their tactics. And if I can't, then we will document the failure and develop contingencies based on what we learn from your attempt. Either way, the Galactic Defense Forces will benefit from your participation. That's a very diplomatic way of saying, am I die? Yes. Welcome to Special Operations. Zira approached, as the military delegation moved away to process paperwork. Her crystalline structure had settled into a steady, clear pattern that I'd learned meant she'd reached some kind of conclusion. I have been thinking about your graduation speech, she said. About questioning protocols and focusing on objectives. I have decided you are both completely wrong and completely right, which is frustrating. How am I both? You are wrong because protocols exist for excellent reasons, and dismissing them entirely is dangerous and disrespectful to those who develop them. But you are right that we had stopped asking why we follow them. We had made protocol execution the goal instead of the tool. That is a significant failure on our part. So what are you going to do about it? I am going to become an instructor at this academy. I am going to teach Protocol 10,001 alongside the traditional protocols. Students will learn both perfect execution and critical thinking about when to use that execution. It will be exhausting and probably cause arguments among the faculty. Sounds perfect for you. You like arguing? Her crystalline structure flickered with what might have been amusement. I do. Also, I have decided that you are not primitive. You are simply unburdened by the weight of tradition, which allows you to see solutions that those of us carrying that weight cannot. It is an advantage born of ignorance, but an advantage nonetheless. I'm going to take that as a compliment. It was intended as one. Try not to die in whatever dangerous assignment they are sending you on. I would like to argue with you again in the future. I'll do my best. Master Vexa found me as I was packing my belongings from the dormitory. His tentacles moved in that pattern that meant respect, which still felt weird, coming from someone who'd wanted to fail me 6 months ago. Martinez, before you depart for your military service, I wanted to give you something. He handed me a small data crystal. This contains my personal notes on combat philosophy, accumulated over 50 years of warfare and instruction. I do not agree with all of your conclusions, but you have reminded me of truths I had forgotten, that the purpose of combat is survival and victory, not aesthetic perfection. That adaptation is more valuable than memorization. That sometimes the simplest solution is the correct one. Master Vexter, are you going soft on me? I am acknowledging that an old warrior learned something from a young fool. Take the crystal. Study it when you have time. And perhaps, when you return, we can collaborate on updating the Academy's curriculum. I believe your Protocol 10,001 has merit, but it requires refinement. You want to turn my simple idea into a complex protocol, don't you? It is what I do, but I promise to preserve the essential question at its core. What are we trying to accomplish, and what is the most effective way to do it? That is a question worth teaching. I took the crystal and shook his tentacle, which was apparently a sign of respect that I'd accidentally stumbled into. Thank you, Master, for not giving up on me even when I gave you every reason to. Thank you for reminding me why I became an instructor. To teach warriors, not performers. Now, go. The galaxy awaits your particular brand of chaos. Blipner and I stood at the Academy gates one last time, looking back at the institution that had expected us both to fail. The building gleamed in the light of 3 suns, impressive and imposing and full of traditions that were now slightly less rigid than they'd been 6 months ago. Do you think we actually changed anything? Blipner asked, his gelatinous form quivering slightly. I think we reminded them that change is possible. Whether they actually change is up to them. But at least now they're asking questions instead of just following protocols blindly. That is more than I expected when you arrived and immediately broke a training dummy on your first day. To be fair, that dummy had it coming. A military transport landed nearby, ready to take us to whatever dangerous mission awaited in the Outer Rim. General Cathar stood at the entrance, his metals gleaming, his expression suggesting that he was either very confident in his decision to recruit me, or was already regretting it. As we walked toward the transport, Blipner asked the question I've been asking myself. What do you think they will ask you when you arrive at the military base? They will want to know your specializations, your protocol expertise, your tactical qualifications. They'll probably ask me which protocols I specialize in. And what will you tell them? I grinned. I'll tell them I specialize in 3 protocols. Hit first, hit hard, and don't stop until they stay down. That's basically 3 protocols, right? That is 1 protocol repeated with increasing violence. Then it's Protocol 10,001. Repeated until the problem is solved. You are going to cause so many arguments in the military. Probably. But I'll survive them. And that's what matters. Plus, I'll have you there to calculate the odds of my survival and tell me how statistically improbable my continued existence is. Your continued existence is very statistically improbable. I estimate you have approximately a 43% chance of surviving your first year in special operations. So you're saying there's a chance? I am saying you should write those farewell messages to your family that I suggested earlier. We boarded the transport, leaving behind the Galactic Combat Institute and beginning whatever came next. Behind us, the Academy continued its ceremonies, slightly changed by the human who'd refused to learn protocols properly and somehow became a legend anyway. The transport lifted off, and through the viewport, I could see the Academy growing smaller. Somewhere in those buildings, instructors were already arguing about Protocol 10,001. Students were questioning whether they needed to execute every step of every protocol perfectly. Andine. Krafthor was probably having a drink and wondering how his carefully ordered institution had been disrupted by one stubborn human with a simple philosophy. Hit hard. Hit smart. Don't stop until the problem is solved. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't traditional. It didn't honor thousands of years of accumulated wisdom, but it worked. And in the end, that's what mattered. The transport jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying us toward danger, adventure, and whatever other problems the galaxy wanted to throw at a human who'd learned that sometimes. The best answer to complexity is clarity, and the best answer to 10,000 protocols is one good question. What are we trying to accomplish? Everything else is just details.